Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. I need to read this meme to you from atheists or Islamophobes or ex-Muslims who'd like to say this. They say, "You Muslims, you stone adulteresses, so barbaric and backwards, you savages should become westernized and become more like us." And the meme responds back and says, "Now please excuse me as I go upstairs and watch my wife get screwed by 30 strangers and a few dogs." Now here's a murtad, ex-Muslim. His name is Yusuf Muhammad. He tries to defend the West to say, that doesn't happen. I have never met a non-Muslim who does this. This is in reference to seeing his wife sleep with other men. So my response is, Yusuf, I guess you were living in a glass bowl all your life like a goldfish and haven't been aware of TV reality shows called Jerry Springer. How about all the sex parties and couple orgies? You think this isn't a thing in the West? Yusuf then replies back and says, yeah, they happen, but it isn't like that everywhere you go. You think a TV show is representative of all of that? Do you live in the West? If so, which Western country? My response, who asserted it's everywhere you go? The point made is that adultery and swingers clubs is part of Western entertainment. You can find one quite easily and accessibly for adult entertainment. I'm from Australia and yes, I live in the West. Yusuf then replies back and says, look at the post. The same generalization about Muslims stoning people to death is made in the same way it makes a generalization about bestiality and orgies. Of course, curiosity, why have you chosen to live in Australia? So my response to him is, why is it a generalization when what has been pointed out was a scandal that is acceptable in Western culture and entertainment? It's even legally accepted. Yusuf then replies back and says, it is a generalization because what it suggests is that Westerners in general have orgies and bestiality. In the same, it is a generalized that Muslims are terrorists or go around stoning people, one bigotry to another. My response, I don't see generalization. If you ask majority of Westerners if sexual intercourse outside marriage is acceptable, you will find majority agreeing. If you ask the same public, would you agree and support consensual sex with other people while married, you will get overwhelming majority agreeing. So like I said, sex orgy is legal in the legal system of the West. Thus, it's not a generalization to claim all do it, rather it's part of their culture, which is the point made here. If I said if you're an apostate and if you went to Saudi, you'll be stoned. If I said that, this doesn't mean everyone in Saudi would want to stone you. Rather, in their culture, there will be hardline members who would want you stoned. Same thing. Yusuf writes back and says, overwhelming majority agreeing to consensual sex in the West whilst married to another person. Can you give me evidence for that? Also, the orgy and the bestiality thing is a generalization also. My response, evidence? You didn't know that consensual agreement between adults is a fundamental principle in the West? Yusuf writes back and says, so you are telling me people in the West overwhelmingly agree that it is okay to have sex with people other than your wife? My response, they may overwhelmingly not agree to it for themselves, but they would agree to give that right to adults so long as they consent to it. It is part of Western culture to give freedom of right to consenting adults. In fact, we can test it right now. Are you an atheist? If so, would you personally allow two consenting adults who are married to have sex with other consenting married couples? Would you accept this behavior? Yusuf then says, yes, but it is generally seen as immoral and pathetic, even in movies and TV shows. When a person cheats, there is a lot of suffering shown and the destructive nature of it. Difference is that they don't have the four-witness system and the suppress of sexual freedom. My response. My question to you is not about cheating adults, but about consenting adults. So do you agree to consenting adults couples screwing other consenting adult couples? Yusuf then writes, yes, in general, he agrees. Well, my response to him is, well, you proved my point. As I stated earlier, if I asked the same question to majority in the West, I would get a majority of approvals, just like your approval. Thus, it's not a misgeneralization when we say sex even in marriage between consenting adults with other married couples is supported by vast majority of the secular Democrats, thus part of Western culture and entertainment, just like homosexuality and other customs. Yusuf then writes back and says, adultery is not generally supported. It is seen as immoral and clearly media shows the suffering of betrayal spouses. The West just doesn't have a punishment for it. To say that overwhelming majority support is returned saying that overwhelming majority believe it is okay to cheat on your spouse. He continues to write, also, homosexuality has been documented through history and is not a Western phenomenon. My response to him, Yusuf, do you only have a bone in your head? We are not discussing cheating adults. Has this point not been made clear to you, or do you suffer from poor reading skills? Thus, it's not betrayal, and no one suffers. So yes, although majority are against cheating, they are not against non-cheating consensual sexual activity with other consenting sexual members who are also married. So yes, overwhelming majority do believe in consenting sexual activity. And you even approved it by your own admission by claiming, yes, you agree to married couples who are sexually active who agree in consenting with other married couples. You then said homosexuality is not a Western phenomenon. I never said it didn't exist in predominantly Muslim countries. When I brought up homosexuality, I brought it up as it being part of Western culture, as meaning accepted. I don't think Muslim majority countries, although there are people doing it, it's not accepted by vast majority, part of its culture, nor even law abiding. Yusuf then writes back, oh okay, my apologies about misunderstanding. So in conclusion, folks, as you can see, these atheists, they want to act on this high moral ground by saying, oh, look, you Muslims are savages, you stone adulteresses and so forth. And, they say your culture is barbaric and it's backward and so forth. But then you come to the West and these Westerners, they actually approve consenting adults who are married to go and have sex with other consenting adults like animals, right? As long as they consent and all members in party of all the adults consent to it, there's no cheating involved, there's no betrayal involved, it is totally acceptable if they all have sex with each other. The atheists try to come and try and defend the culture of the West and say, oh, look, the West doesn't do it. Oh, the West thinks it's bad. But no, in fact, if it's consenting, it's okay, and thus it's part of the Western culture. So yes, when the West points a finger at the Muslim countries saying it's barbaric, it's backward, they stone adulteresses, and they say, oh, come to the West, it's more of a high moral ground, yet you have a man going upstairs to watch his wife get screwed by 30 other couples, then that's somehow now morally superior, accepted in Western culture.